We can go ahead and get started. All right, so welcome to Big Atlas Weekend, everybody. This is the kickoff, so we just wanted to, get everything started, get excited, share some information with you guys so you know what to expect this weekend and how to get the most out of it. I'm Paula Mandarino. I'm with the North Carolina Bird Atlas. I'm part of the outreach committee. In case y'all don't know, we have people from 4 different states. We have North Carolina, New York, Maryland, DC, and Maine all with us today. So it's exciting that we get to come together and celebrate this together. So Doug, do you want to talk about how this meeting is going to function with Zoom and everything and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Doug Hitchcox, the outreach coordinator for the Maine Bird Atlas. As you've probably noticed, we're using the webinar feature of Zoom. So you'll just be seeing panelists as they come on throughout the evening. As you might have also noticed, the chat just goes to us panelists as well. So as you post in there, just be aware that other folks cannot, other participants, I should say, cannot see, but all the panelists can. Being a webinar, we also have the Q&A feature, which is going to be a better way for us to kind of organize any questions that you have that come in. So especially we'll have our keynote speakers a little later on, but we'll try to get in a little Q&A as well earlier. So make sure you use the, we'll try to monitor both the chat, and as is put in here, I guess you can put to panelists and attendees in the chat, but I know by default it's set to panelists, so I don't think people are seeing too much else, except it looks like Sandy just pulled it off. So you can do that in the chat, but if you do have questions that you'd like to get addressed, do try to use that Q&A feature. That'll certainly make it a lot easier for us to handle. So with that, maybe I'll let Paula just say what our schedule is gonna look like for tonight.
Yeah, so tonight, after this short little intro, we're gonna talk about like the entire Big Atlas Weekend schedule, the way the competition works with the categories and the prizes. We'll have a few announcements for you guys, and then we will hand the floor over to our guest speakers. In there, we're gonna have a couple moments where we're gonna do those Q&A sessions like Doug talked about. So yeah, just continue to post your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll go through those and make sure we can answer everybody's questions during those allotted Q&A times. So yeah, go ahead and get started. All right, so the big goal of the Big Atlas Weekend is simply to bring more awareness to breeding birds. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times when I go out birding, I kind of get caught in the excitement of, looking for new birds or looking for rare birds and adding to my life list. So the really exciting thing about atlasing is it's an opportunity to see birds in a new way. So it kind of brings that new excitement to birding and helps you see common birds in a new way. And so each of our 4 states are conducting an atlas right now. So we really wanted to come together and celebrate this exciting wonder of breeding birds together. So we just wanted to make a competition out of it and make it fun. So if by the end of this weekend, whether you've atlased a lot before this weekend or this is your first weekend atlasing, if you have experienced breeding birds and you've had fun, then you've done it right. So that's our primary goal.
And as Paula said, it is, going to be fun and certainly a fun competition. As I'm sure you're all aware, at least in hopefully your own home states, it's fun to have 4 different states doing atlases right now. A fun thing to kind of look at is essentially how different some of these atlases are, or how different the atlases have been in different states. So this first column, just looking at the number of atlases that are, I guess, including the one that's currently being done, but the number of atlases that will be completed in the state. So Maine's on its second. Fun to see that Maryland, DC, and New York have already completed their second and are now starting their third. And this is the first one for North Carolina. And we obviously won't go into it tonight, but there's so much value in doing these kind of atlasing efforts, and especially seeing the change over time. The other fun thing to look at state by state is kind of what year we're on. Here in Maine, we're just starting our fourth year and really trying to drive effort out to priority blocks and get some of our blocks completed really as fast as possible. But as you can see, the other states, New York, Maryland, DC, both starting their second of 5 years for each, and then North Carolina just getting into their first. So all of us Mainers in another 2 years will have to pick where we're going to spend our vacations. North Carolina sounds all right. So then looking at the number of priority blocks across the state that have some data in them, it is a fun one. I enjoy this comparison because here we are 4 years into the Maine Atlas, and 94% of our priority blocks have at least been visited, which is fun to look at. Maryland, DC, where arguably it's a little bit easier to get around that state. There's some priority blocks in Maine that may require a plane, and I apologize for being a little biased towards Maine. But anyways, it's fun to see how this breaks down. And really my favorite column is just looking at the number of volunteers so far in each state. I'm really excited to look at these numbers after this weekend. We really hope that this event, again, as we kind of talked about it being a fun competition, but also just trying to bring in more people from the public to take part in this. So I'm really excited to see how these numbers bump up after this kind of targeted effort for the weekend. The last thing I wanted to talk about is really just kind of the fun and arguably, important aspect, or one way that we approach atlasing. I think Paula mentioned, we a lot of us, I'm sure, are maybe birders first and fell into atlasing as part of our hobby. But I like to show this picture. This was the first bird that I confirmed for the Maine Bird Atlas, and this was during a van trip I was leading. A bunch of us birders going out trying to basically see as many species as we could in a day, and just tick off all the species. We were down basically by the coast looking for sea ducks, and arguably not appreciating the birds that we were seeing. They were just another check mark on our list for the day. And it was fun. We saw our first rock pigeon as we were driving out of Portland. Like, ignore them for the rest of the day. Until we saw this one that was actually, picking up nesting material, flying off with it. It was slowly starting to build a nest underneath this little walkway platform. And it really made us kind of stop, really threw quite a wrench in the day's plan of trying to see as many species as possible, because we ended up spending 20, almost 30 minutes just watching these rock pigeons, these common birds, doing really cool nesting behaviors, and seeing some of the displays that they would do. It really made us appreciate these birds that we had otherwise, just kind of dismissed so quickly. So whether it's the rare, unusual, or the common and introduced non-native species, every bird counts for these atlases, and I like to kind of always keep that in mind as we think about some of the effort that we're putting into these.
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing about this appreciating birds in a new way. So I'm actually not a very avid birder. I'm more of a novice. That's what I would consider myself, at least. I've only been birding for a few years, and so I think the opportunity that atlasing provides kind of reminds me of when I was first starting to birdwatch, because kind of like Doug was saying, you start seeing common birds and doing these really wonderful things. Like, instead of just seeing a bluebird, like you know, when you're at the park in passing, seeing one like raise a family in your backyard is really exciting. And it kind of has that zest that it kind of had when you first started bird watching, or at least that's my experience. So it kind of reminds me of like, even when I first started birding, how I was blown away by like the bright red of a cardinal. So I think that's like my favorite thing about atlasing is just the novelty to just simple details that are happening all around us, like in our backyards and in the parks that we visit, in the sites in the middle of nowhere. Like it's such a great opportunity to appreciate birds in a new way. So I hope that all this gets you excited about this weekend and makes you excited to go out atlasing, whether you've been atlasing a lot or you're trying it for the first time. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and introduce Adrienne. I think she's next if she wants to hop on and introduce herself.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So quick intro. My name is Adrienne Leppold. I am the state songbird specialist with the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and I am the project director for the Maine Bird Atlas. So yeah, let's kick this off. So what does the Big Atlas Weekend entail? So it is an attempt to accumulate as much information as we can over a short period of time. And so that period of time is going to start this Friday evening at 6 p.m. and will run through the entire weekend. Nocturnal checklists and observations count as well. And it will officially end on Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. So as soon as the clock ticks over to midnight Monday morning, the Big Atlas Weekend has ended. So any bird observations made and entered into each respective state portal between 6 p.m. Friday and 11:59 p.m. Sunday will count towards meeting your state's goals and challenges for this friendly competition. And what it means to get the checklist into your state's portal, we each have a specific portal in eBird. Basically, the portal, for any of you who might not be familiar, functions as a file folder. You can think of eBird in and of itself as this giant filing cabinet. And so we just want to help organize the bird observation data that you're submitting by state. So for example, in Maine, we have a Maine Bird Atlas portal, and I'll let all of the other states specify the names of theirs. And then I've noticed this question already came up from one of our Mainers, and so I will address that now as well. You have until noon on Monday to submit your data. So spend as much time over the weekend actually in the field atlasing. If you're not using the eBird app real time and entering your observations as you go, you will have until noon on Monday. After we hit noon, the data is going to be downloaded out of the eBird data frame, and then we are going to analyze it. Julie and Gabriel have been working really hard to come up with code to analyze everything so we can determine the winners by next Wednesday for the awards Zoom ceremony. So that's the time frame. So I will hand it over to Gabriel.
Hey, thanks, Adrienne. I am Gabriel Foley. I coordinate the Maryland and DC Breeding Bird Atlas. I love atlasing. I think it's pretty much the best thing out there. Getting to coordinate it is pretty much the best job. I'm going to tell you about the challenges that we've got. I'm really excited about these. I do have a bit of a competitive streak, and I am looking forward to seeing Maryland and DC win this. We have a trophy, and I'm pretty excited to see that come here. So we've got 7 challenges that you can take part in. The winner of each challenge in each state will receive their choice of a Cornell Lab of Ornithology Bird Academy course. These courses were donated for the Big Atlas Weekend event by Cornell. So we want to say a big thank you to them for their generosity. Each of the challenges is intended to help us meet our goals for this weekend. So that includes things like increasing coverage in blocks without a lot of effort, finding nocturnal species, and just growing our Atlas community. You can find the descriptions of the challenges on each state's eBird portal. So if you head just to the Atlas website on eBird, right on the home page, you'll find more information about everything that I'm saying. So if you forget it, it's not a big deal. You can go find it pretty easily. There are some slight differences between each state as well. So if you want to double check anything, just go to your state's Atlas portal, and you'll find the info there. So, okay, here are the 7 challenges that we've got for you this weekend. If you've never Atlas before, you can submit a complete checklist to the portal. A winner will be randomly drawn from all of the complete checklists that are submitted by brand new Atlasers. Now, Maine is treating all checklists the same for their challenges, just something to keep in mind, whether those checklists are complete or incomplete. But for the other 3 states, New York, Maryland, DC, and North Carolina, you're going to want to stick with complete checklists. So a complete checklist is just a complete list of all the birds that you were able to identify while you were out atlasing. It basically just means that you didn't intentionally leave a species off your checklist, like starlings or pigeons or something. As long as you record all the species that you were able to identify, you're submitting a complete checklist. Okay, so the next challenge is just to use breeding codes. Submit complete checklists with breeding codes to be drawn as the winner. Following on that, submit complete checklists with confirmed breeding codes from a priority block to be part of this challenge. Confirmed codes are mostly the breeding codes with 2 letters. So there's codes with 1 letter, codes with 2 letters. Confirmed codes generally have the 2 letters. They usually have to do with finding nests or chicks. Priority blocks can be found using the Explore tool on each Atlas's eBird website. If you're in Maryland or DC, we don't have priority blocks, so you can submit checklists to any block that you like. We also want to increase our nocturnal effort. That's one of the hardest parts of any atlas. You might want to write this down, although it's also on the website for reference, like I was saying before, so you don't have to worry too much about it. But nocturnal checklists are considered to be any complete checklist from a priority block, and then this is the important part, that was conducted between 20 minutes after sunset and 40 minutes before sunrise. So this is just how eBird defines a nocturnal checklist. If you have correctly submitted a nocturnal checklist, it'll have a little nocturnal tag on the checklist. The next challenge varies between regions a little bit. In New York and Maine, you're submitting a complete checklist with at least 1 confirmed grassland species. You can find that list on each state's respective website. In Maryland and DC, you're submitting a complete checklist with at least 1 confirmed priority species. Those are just species that are at risk here. But again, you can find the list of priority species on the website. If you're in North Carolina, you can skip right over this challenge. For the next challenge, you want to pick a priority block that has less than 20 hours of effort in it. You can find that using the Explore tool on the website. You submit complete checklists that are at least 5 minutes long to be included in this one. And the final challenge that we have for you is similar to the one I just described, except that for this one, you have to find a priority block with no effort in it at all. This will certainly be a challenge in Maryland and DC, We've had an absurdly fast rate of coverage across the state, but it might be easier in North Carolina since their atlas is only a few months old. Once this all wraps up, we'll standardize the results and compare each region. I won't go into the details of exactly how that's being done, but if you're interested, those details are explained on the event page on each state's website. All that you really need to know about this competition is that Maryland and DC have the most enthusiastic atlasers. So we will be winning this competition.
I'm going to challenge you, Gabriel. We have the most atlasers in New York of any of the atlases. So I'm Julie Hart. I coordinate the New York Breeding Bird Atlas. And I was going to talk about the interstate overall state champion winner competition. So all the challenges that Gabriel was just talking about are for individuals. And so there'll be, 7 winners in each state. But then we also, because we're all a little bit competitive ourselves, we also wanted to set up a challenge to select an overall state winner. So we determined a setup to try to select in a fair way an overall state winner. And we are going to be using 3 challenges in scoring each of the states in order to come up with an overall winner. So for that, it's going to be the number of atlas checklists. For each state will be 1 category. Another category will be the number of checklists with a confirmed code. And then the 3rd category will be the number of nocturnal hours. And rest assured, we will be standardizing the data across each state. So don't worry if there's, different size, different number of blocks, different number of people. We will control for that. But we do hope to win all of this in New York because we have the most people. And then we do have a trophy that we have designed, and that will go to this year's winner. And because we have set this up to be an annual event, next year we will be doing a very similar setup, and then whomever wins next year will be presented the trophy from this year's winner. So it will be passed on around the states for years to come. So with that, I think I will leave it to Chris.
Thank you, Julie. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to those in my home state of North Carolina, my birth state of New York, my sister state in Maryland, and my bucket list state of Maine, actually. So again, thank you for joining us. I am Christopher Smith. I am the North Carolina Bird Atlas Coordinator. It is my pleasure to welcome you and invite you to the Big Atlas Weekend Training Nights, which will be tomorrow night specifically for each of your states, and that'll begin at 7 p.m. You can find the links to your state's training evenings if you go to the website or go to the Facebook event page and then link to the state pages. You can go from there. Some states have already sent out invitations and require registration, but each state is a little bit different. So just check out those state pages and you can find out all that information. Don't forget, this time next week, we are doing the Big Atlas Weekend ceremony at the award ceremony. That will be Wednesday night of next week on the 30th at 7 p.m. You can go ahead and register now. I will include that link here shortly in the chat, but it is bit.ly/Big Atlas Weekend _awards. That link has been sent out. It's also in that Facebook chat. And it is also very exciting to share with you that as of today, Merlin has released the Sound ID portion for their app. So if you have not opened that app in a while, make sure you update it, open it up and give it a chance to explore and assist you with some of those Sound IDs. And with that, I am all done with my portion. So I believe I'm turning it over to Doug.
Yeah, thank you. And I should mention, Julie, I'm glad you turned your video. Julie, turn your video on for a second. And anyone who has any Atlas or Big Atlas Weekend swag, if you want to show it off. There we go. Look at these T-shirts. I want to make the quick plug that the money generated from the sale of our swag on the TeePublic store is what's going to help keep these events, the Big Atlas Weekend, going in the future. So if you couldn't get a shirt or a coffee mug or something like that for this year, it'll be a fun one. Oh, I see that I've my T-shirt's sitting in my mailbox right now. It got delivered today, and anyways, glad to see the link is now in the chat. Just want to make that quick plug that grab yourself some cool swag. Represent your states with those logos. But thank you to our models for showing off tonight. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speakers tonight. These are two speakers that are going to talk about female bird song and identification and some other fun female bird activities, as we'll see, which is such a fun thing to think about with atlasing. Like we put so much focus on, the typically bright male birds and singing, and I've been so happy to see how even just the way we talk about birds and their breeding behaviors has changed just in the few years that we've been doing the Maine Bird Atlas. So our two speakers are members of the Galbatross Project. Perhaps let them really talk about what that is about. But they are Stephanie Beilke, conservation scientist at Audubon Great Lakes, and Purbita Saha, the senior editor at Popular Science. So with that, I will turn it over to them to teach us a thing or two about female birds.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Purbita, and I am going to share my screen quite quickly. So thank you everyone for joining us before the exciting Atlas weekend. As Doug mentioned, Stephanie and I helped co-found the Galbatross Project, which is still a pretty infant crowdsourcing science movement. I just strung a bunch of words together there. But essentially what we're trying to do is have people focus on looking for female birds and figuring out some really unique identifying features for the female type of some of the common species we see around us. Some of these facts and features you can go out and find, maybe in your field guide. You can read up on Birds of the World on the Cornell website, but a lot of it is still unknown, or it's just passed off as anecdotal information between bird banders or birders and ornithologists. So we're really trying to kind of amass this knowledge and put together, hopefully, this public database of information on how we can all better understand and identify female birds out in the field. So it's funny that we have this first line on our slide because as all the Atlas leaders have put it, this is a friendly competition. But the larger practice of birding with an eye toward females, I think what Paula said at the beginning in terms of how atlasing is kind of a departure from the get it and go nature of birding, especially if you're like really into, chasing rarities and listing and such, focusing on females really makes you slow down. And as founders of the Galbatross Project, we've seen this just in our own personal birding practice. And it's really been about going out to your local patch,
again, finding like a big flock of a common species, and then really homing in on different individuals to understand what they're doing in context, and seeing how you can differentiate those sexes. It is a challenge, which makes it a really great practice, especially for birders like you who have some experience under your belt, and you're looking really to build on your natural history knowledge of the species you pursue. And again, even though it's a challenge, it's fun. And that's just a testament to birding, right? We can't understand everything that's out there, but that mystery keeps us going back for more. Our presentation today will kind of just scratch the surface of some of the tips we've learned through our years of focusing on female birds. And we're hoping to cover a few of the species that you might see out on your tracts. And one of those species, the white-breasted nuthatch. So we've got a female here. You can tell by the rather faint gray cap on this bird's head. This is a really great photograph that really helps show that clear difference. In a male, it would be like about the same, the cap would be the same color as the nape of the neck. So it is a hard one to see in the field unless like you really have a bird out on a clear feeder or your binoculars are really awesome. I've had trouble with it. So I've really been depending on photographs to understand this difference. And I also hear that it's more prevalent in female nuthatches up north, and I'm not quite sure why the reason is behind that.
All right. Hi, everyone. So as the slide says, why should we look for female birds? Well, there are so many reasons, right? You're all here, so hopefully it's not necessarily an audience that I need to convince you, but that's what today's presentation is all about. So, and as Purbita said, we're just scratching the surface today with our presentation on why paying attention to female birds is important, but we already know that this is, paying attention to female birds is huge for conservation. We're just starting to learn why it might be, because we've historically had a bias towards males, and that can affect so many things, from photography to listening to keying into sounds, and influencing how we do bird surveys, and then inevitably, surveys that inform conservation. So we do know from one study that focused on golden wing warblers, they found that the research was really pointing them towards where males were spending their time on the wintering grounds. But then when they started paying attention to females, they learned that the females were actually using habitat in different geography. And so if they only paid attention to males, they would end up conserving habitat in one place and then only really saving half the species. So we believe that paying attention to females also makes you a better birder. It actually ties in really nicely with the atlas, because you're kind of doing the same thing where, when you're paying attention to females, you're paying attention to behavior, you're following individuals around. So you're really keying in on these details that you may not look at otherwise if you're just purely out listing. So I believe that when you're paying attention to females, or when you're atlasing, either or both, it really opens up kind of a new world. And like what was mentioned earlier in today's presentations, is that you're learning the common birds even better when you start to kind of key in on these details. So with today's presentation, we're focusing on really a broad overview of things to look for when you're identifying female birds. But again, this is just the beginning, and we really hope this all invites you to do your own research and find out some interesting ways to identify female birds that you're interested in.
So, and this is just a list of some of the ways that we're using to identify female birds, from plumage to size and behavior. A lot of that leads into breeding behavior, which goes well with the atlas, vocalizations, habitat usage, and so on. So the first one that we're going to talk about is sexual dimorphism. And the obvious one that I'm sure you all are aware of is that many birds are sexually dimorphic, or the males differ from the females in their plumage, which is basically what you are seeing right off the bat. You can see these male wood ducks, female wood ducks look quite different. And but there's a couple of different ways that we can categorize sexual dimorphism, because you might see these obvious plumage differences in the wood ducks. Otherwise, you may have more subtle plumage differences that you really might need to kind of look in your binoculars, or even have the bird in hand to see, or you can also look for just a patch of difference. So it's like you might see a bird in your binoculars at first and say, oh, I don't know what it is, and then you get the right view of that distinct kind of patch, and then suddenly you know. So the obvious ones, I think we can all recognize. If you know anything about birds, you know which one is the male and which one is the female by looking at this picture. So this is a scarlet tanager, the male on the left and the female on the right. And there's when you're thinking about these obvious differences, it also helps you key in and kind of learn, why these differences developed. You're thinking about sexual selection pressures, meaning that, females may choose males that are brighter. They really like the colors. But then there's also pressures that kind of lead to a female looking drabber, which is kind of often the dynamic that we see with male and female birds that are really different looking. Is that, the female is often spending time in the nest, and it's not adaptive for that bird to be brightly colored, because it brings in, eyes of predators. So that is the case of the obvious one, though I do want to say that sometimes obvious isn't always obvious, because sometimes, a lot of times with these birds that are really obvious at their breeding stage, they aren't as obvious in their non-breeding state. So scarlet tanager is one where the young males and young females often look similar to the adult female. So when we're making these differentiations, we also have to think about what time of year it is to really be able to know for sure that you're looking at a female bird.
Yes, so we are kind of going along the spectrum of plumage dimorphism here, getting to the more challenging ones, but we're still in friendly territory with pileated woodpeckers, and I'm sorry if you like to say it pileated, but I'm going to stick with pileated for today. The key with the adults to look for is the malar stripe, so that red mustache. You'll see it on the male on the left versus the female, who just has a black malar stripe on the right. And this is a trait that carries over between a lot of the common woodpeckers. So you can use it for northern flickers so it's a fun one. And then with kestrels, also very, very feisty species, and great one to get on breeding habitat. The male on the left is going to have a lot more blue, especially on the wings, and the female is going to be pretty much all rusty brown and barred along the wings. And I believe there's a little more blue on the back of the male's head as well.
Yeah, the chest is different on the kestrels too. So the male, you can't actually see it in that picture, but the male has spots and the female has streaking on it. And one thing that was really fun is that I got to help I got to see some nestlings being banded a week or so ago, and they already display those differences as chicks. So that's a really fun one. You can move back to So I got the next one is subtle differences. So you may be familiar with the yellow warbler, super common around where I'm at in Chicago area. and one of our most common breeding warbler species. And so we see these all the time. And if you just catch sight or just a glimpse of a yellow dot, you can instantly know, oh, see that's a yellow warbler. But the male and female difference is a little bit more subtle. The male, or the main difference is the amount of streaking on the chest. And so with the male on the left, you have pretty bold orange streaking. And the female can go from almost no streaking at all to just kind of faint streaks, which you can barely see on this picture on the right. And then the next example is the cedar waxwing. And this was one of my favorite ones. I didn't learn this until I caught one at a bird banding station that I was running. I never knew that you could tell the difference. And it's actually in the amount of black on the throat. So the male on the left has, I think it was actually written in our notes, it has a neck beard versus the female on the right, which has a soul patch. So basically what that means is that you see a lot of black on the throat on the male and just a little bit on the female. And again, that's really hard to see in the field, but it's a fun thing to look for once you know what the difference is.
Okay, some larger challenges. So looking at our one and only regular hummingbird species on the East Coast, the ruby-throated hummingbird. Obviously between adult female and adult male, that's less of a challenge. The name of the bird itself is connected to the male's beautiful gorget. But when it comes to the younger males, that can be much more of a tricky ID. So 2 features to key in on if you're not quite sure. Of course, the seasonality is going to make a difference if you're going to be seeing young males or not. But if you look on the left, this is a young male, and he's got this kind of like cinnamon buffy feathering on his flanks. So that's usually a good sign that it's not female, it's a young male. And then also, I really like this photo on the right of a female because you get that full display on the tail feathers. An adult female is going to have really fresh looking rectrices. So those tail feathers, they're going to have like really bold white tips and nice like curved round edges. Whereas on a younger male, because he's still preparing to go into that next set of plumage, those tail feathers are going to be a lot more shabby and less demarcated with the white. And this species is a fun, it's one of the favorites of the Galbatross Project. Again, when it comes to adult female American redstarts and adult male American redstarts, the difference is day and night. But when it comes to the young males, they can look a lot like the females. They have the yellow armpits, they have the yellow like patches on the tail. So again, it's a very, very subtle difference. But you'll see with the male on the left, there are some very like random smudgy black feathers on its face. And this is an indicator that, it's going to glow up to that full black and orange plumage that it's going to have as an adult. So yeah, it really helps to have a clear photograph in this case. But if you're ever caught in the field, just make sure that that female you're looking at is all female, very, very clean gray and white all over the belly and the face and the neck. Cool. So now we are moving off plumage, other visual differences. And this one's size is really helpful in mostly raptors. So as many of you might know, a lot of the female types in raptor species are larger than the male types. There's been some cool research, though still inconclusive on why that is. You know, it could be like a whole connection to reproduction and, you know, making sure the female can invest enough energy resources into raising this very demanding set of raptor chicks. So with red-tailed hawks, the females are about 20% longer. And with bald eagles, the females are generally 25% larger. This is a really hard ID feature to depend on because you need to be in a scene where, you know, you're with a confirmed mated pair. So you have that comparison with the males. But as atlasers, you're perfectly, you know, set up for that job.
So along the lines back on color again, this is a pretty unique one, but also one of my favorite examples of sexual dimorphism, bill color in European starlings in breeding plumage. And this is another little factoid that I learned only from bird banding, because in bird banding, you have the bird in your hand, and that's the perfect time to tell things about it that you wouldn't otherwise know, like what approximate age and what is the sex of the bird. And I caught a starling when I was doing a master's thesis, when I was banding birds in Wisconsin. And I was like, oh, it's a starling. Like, I wish it was like a warbler or whatever. But like, I was looking through the Pile Guide, which is basically a bird bander's Bible. And it said you can tell the sex on an adult breeding bird by the base of the bill. In the female, it's pink, and in the male, it's blue or bluish gray. And I was like, this has to be a joke, because how could this gender stereotype exist in birds, pink and blue? But apparently it's true, and you can see with your own eyes that these pictures are not doctored. This is real life. The female does have a pinkish color at the base of the bill, and the male has a bluish color. Note that this is only during the summer, because in the winter and with juvenile birds, they do have a darker bill color, so you don't see that coloration difference. But just one fun fact, and if you really want to pour through starling flocks with your scope and zoom in on that bill, then good luck to you. They also do come up pretty close to you, so you might be able to see it without a scope too. Another fun one that I just learned a couple of years ago, when all the team members of the Galbatross Project, or at least 3 of us, were participating in the World Series of Birding, which is a whole nother story that we couldn't fit into this presentation. But I got to go out to Cape May, New Jersey. I live in Chicago again, so I don't normally see oyster catchers of any variety. But we were doing research on what kind of male or female differentiation we could make during our World Series effort, which, you know, we didn't see a lot of female birds, which was our goal, to just see female birds. But we did see a female American oyster catcher, because one of our teammates was able to discover that a genetic analysis revealed that only females have a trait where they have an eye fleck, which you can see in this picture. It's basically like an extension of the pupil. And so this is pretty uncommon. I don't know other birds that exhibit this trait, but it is found in both the American and black oyster catcher. And once you see it, it's just something that's really cool. And now every time I see an oyster catcher, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to see that eye fleck.
And I think that it can, like, I've only seen the one eye fleck as well, but I think there can be multiple eye flecks. But again, it's any eye fleck, it should be a female. Awesome. So we made it through plumage and eye flecks. Now it's time for behaviors, which is really where the true heart of the atlasing is. So where we could, we tried to incorporate breeding codes. Stephanie has more atlas experience than I do, so she might cite them even better than me. But first I wanted to start with migratory behavior, even though that's not super relevant right now in the heart of summer. It can be really telling, especially in spring migration and for some species, fall migration. Generally, the trend is that the males of a species, the adult males, will travel up north first so they can scope out the territory, size up the rivals, and just be ready for when the females come and the whole breeding process begins. So a place that has really great data on this is the Black Swamp Bird Observatory up in Ohio. As many of you might know, it's like a really great songbird trap during spring migration because of the Great Lakes. And the banders there have found like long-term historical trends in exactly when the male warblers especially land versus the females versus juveniles. And they've found that for a lot of the species, I think including black and white warbler and ruby-crowned kinglets, the males will be there like 10 days earlier than the females, and that's like pretty standard year to year. So that's really neat. With ruby-crowned kinglets, I mean, they are sexually dimorphic. Again, the male gets to lay claim to the name. They have that ruby crown, but that's not always visible. They really have to flash it for you to be able to tell. So another thing to look out for again is timing. The adult males will be up here in spring a lot earlier than the females. And then in the fall, it will be the reverse. So the juveniles leave, or the young birds leave first, then the females, and then the males will like really straggle, at least here in New Jersey, up till like October, November. I think Stephanie gave me this tip just the other day that if you see a flock of warblers, was it in spring, Stephanie?
Yeah, kind of like when you're hitting peak migration, and most of the kinglets have gone.
Yeah, so then in spring migration, if you see kinglets mixed in with a flock of warblers, they're likely the males because...
The female.
Are we talking about fall migration?
Oh, spring, sorry.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, so the adult males are beating both the warblers and the females in that case. So cool, I will have to look out for that next spring.
All right, so pair feeding, and this is where we get into the atlas codes as well. So if you see any birds doing this over the weekend, you can use the code C for courtship. So pair feeding is often initiated by the male in many species. Doesn't happen in all birds, but you will see it in blue jays, cedar waxwings, and northern cardinals. And for blue jays and cedar waxwings, they look very similar. So if you see a bird initiating pair feeding, it's likely the male, and then the bird that's receiving the gift is female. You may definitely see cedar waxwings doing this behavior now because they tend to be pretty late breeders. They start nesting in July to take advantage of the seasonal fruit that's available later in the summer. And when they do this courtship behavior in cedar waxwings, the male will initiate and he'll pass a berry to the female, like in the picture. But a fun thing to look for this bird is that they will pass the fruit back and forth, one back to another. So the male will pass the berry to the female, and then she'll pass it back. And they'll kind of continue doing that for some time. And it's really, really fun behavior to look for.
Yeah, so one great thing that we've learned through researching these different behaviors is that people might assume that it's mostly female birds who do the nest building and the incubation and the infant care. But there are a lot of bird species where the duties are shared, or the male plays a pretty good parenting role. So it's been fun to see which species, are balanced and progressive like that versus the ones that, really shunt all the responsibility on the female. But with nest building, there are some species where if you're seeing the birds collecting nest material, it's a good sign that you're watching a female. So the eastern kingbird is one, and the black-capped chickadee, so the Maine state atlas mascot. The males will help to actually like excavate the cavity, and they'll stick around during the incubation and chick rearing process. But in terms of actually building the nest and the hole, that's all the female.
And when it comes to incubation, we do see a lot of female-only incubation in birds. There are plenty of birds across the board where they share the incubation duties, but more often than not, it seems to be a lot of birds where the female is the incubator. So if you see a bird on the nest, for some of these species, you may use an occupied nest code or nest with eggs in the atlas. And you may also be able to tell if it's a female, if it's a Canada goose, American robin, great crested flycatcher, song sparrow, and all Empidonex flycatchers. So we joke that even if you can't ID the Empidonex flycatcher, like this least flycatcher to species, you may be able to tell if it's a female if you see it sitting on a nest. But I don't want to say that to all you atlasers, because you really should know the identification of the species. Otherwise, the data isn't quite as useful. For some of the cavity nesters, like eastern bluebird and black-capped chickadee, you can also tell if it's a female that was incubating a nest. If you see a bird that has kind of a crumpled tail that was in a nest box, that may be an indication that it was incubating.
Yeah, and with caring for young, I decided to focus on waterfowl just because we haven't represented them much in this presentation. And also it's just super cute to see a female with a long chain of chicks behind her. I mean, some waterfowl species, again, the care for young is split among the parents, but in some, it all rests on the female shoulders. So this was a fun story that a photographer, Brent Sichik, he came upon a few years ago, where he noticed this common merganser female who had just like picked up, I think it was like 70 something little chicks had just kind of glommed onto her, which is quite amazing. But again, you'll have to see what species you're looking at, because in some like common loons and a lot of the grebes, the males will be hanging around with the chicks on their back and doing just as much work.
All right, so as atlasers, you are all very familiar with fecal sacs, right? Or you're about to be. So that's the code FS, carrying fecal sacs. So that's like a bird diaper. With songbirds, the chicks at a certain stage, they produce feces that is packed into kind of like a sealed package, so that it makes nest sanitation very easy for the adults, where instead of leaving droppings everywhere, they can pick it up and move it somewhere far away from the nest, so that predators or other visitors may not be attracted to it. And so nest sanitation, oftentimes it's kind of an overlooked behavior, but from most of the research we found, a lot of pairs share, or the males and females share in this behavior. And kind of knowing this also is revealing to how this whole like nesting process goes, because You can see that for many birds, it's very common for the females to do the nest building and incubation. And then as the chicks are hatched, then it shifts for a lot of species where the males and females are sharing in taking care of the young and, cleaning the nest, because suddenly, there's a lot more responsibility involved in raising, 3 to 4 or 5 chicks than there was just as in the beginning, where the female is sitting and the male is, busy defending the territory. So it's fun to kind of see those shifts in responsibilities and how that results in the different behaviors of the sexes. So in some species, we do know some information that, one sex is more, partakes more in the nest sanitation than the other, but it all kind of depends on where the research is. I found in downy woodpeckers, there was a study where they saw mostly the male was doing the fecal sac clearing. And then for Dixisel, it was the opposite. It was only the female was observed doing this. So it's another thing to look at, but oftentimes, it may or may not point you to which one is a female. But in the picture with the robin, we see that's a male, because that bright orange breast, dark cap. So we know based on the plumage differences.
Okay, so we're going to move on to vocalizations. This is going to be a quick section, despite the fact that this is probably one of the more exciting fields of discovery when it comes to learning more about female birds. And again, you all are going to have a great opportunity to really dig into female vocalizations and learn something new out there. Females are going to be very communicative with whether it be males, whether it be with their chicks once they've hatched. Often when they're on the nest, they might be quieter just to, stay on the DL. But yeah, there's been kind of like a movement recently among ornithologists to really understand if female birds are as muted as we think they are. And what they've found is that both ancestrally and in modern songbirds, there are a lot of species where the females do sing. They're just not, as complex or as prominent as the males. So they've gone relatively unnoticed. One species where we do have a decent amount of understanding is the Baltimore oriole. So I probably won't have time to play all of these clips, but I'll play the oriole because that one's probably going to come up in a lot of your ranges. So the female has, they do call it a song, and it's a similar, like, sort of clear whistle, but it's generally going to be a lot shorter and a lot less complex than the male's cheery whistle, and it usually is on a descending note. So here is the song. Yeah, so it's, you'll probably want to listen to the male song a few times just to make sure like you can actually compare them and distinguish them, but they are pretty different. There was a really weird fact that I found that in places where the bullocks and Baltimore orioles, their range overlaps, they do hybridize, and people have seen cases where when a female Baltimore oriole mates with a Bullock's oriole, she starts to learn the male Bullock's oriole song a little and incorporating it into her own, which just opens up a whole box of questions about how females learn song. Like that's very later in their age. Yeah, that's, again, like I said, lots of exciting biology to understand there. I'll also play the Great Horned Owl just because this is a real classic. So when you hear the male and female duetting together, an evening in the woods, you should be able to tell them apart from their voices. So the females' hoots will always be higher pitched than the males. So that's how you can tell who she is in that partnership. Sorry, let's start with those. And just highly recommend checking out the Female Birdsong Project. That's the group of scientists I mentioned who have been kind of tracing bird song, like from the ancestor of songbirds to modern birds, trying to understand, you know, where the like real sexual differences are there.
All right, habitat usage. So like I alluded to earlier, in the case for the golden wing warblers, and oftentimes with our migratory birds in their wintering grounds, they may use totally different habitats and may even be geographically separated during the non-breeding period. But there's a number of ways that the sexes may also use habitat differently, or they may just appear in different parts of the habitat when you're trying to look for them, often with, you know, females being a little more secretive during the, you know, the incubation stage. So one of the examples we have is the bobolink and red-winged blackbird. We often, you know, see more males than females because the males tend to be more visible when you're walking through an open area. The males are showy and they're broadcasting themselves, and they're also kind of visible on the top of, you know, at the top of grass. Whereas the females are either busy foraging or, you know, tending to their nests, and they'll be lower in the grass. So it may be harder to see them. It's always kind of interesting to me when I'm in a grassland and it's like you almost see just nothing but males, and the females kind of disappear, but they're also camouflaged. So that doesn't help much either. We also have a little information on, you know, downy woodpeckers actually exploit different parts of the tree, with the males foraging on small branches and the females tending more to the tree trunk. So that's something that you can look for if you see downy woodpeckers in your backyard. See if they actually, you know, are using different parts of the tree. With the American kestrel as well, they will segregate habitat types a little bit, even when they're on the breeding ground. So females will use more of the stick to the grassland, and then males will tend to use edge habitats near forest edge.
Okay, this is the fun part, to see what you've learned tonight. But also, it seems like a lot of the audience has had previous knowledge on some of these species and others that we didn't include. So I feel like you all are going to ace this quiz, although it is hard. So we'll put that up front. Thank you everyone for hanging in. I know it's past 8 o'clock, so we'll go pretty quickly through these. Basically, I will show you the photo, and you can tell us if you think it's a male or female type of the species. You can type it into the chat if you want, or you can just, you know, keep track on your own, and then Stephanie will quickly go through the answers. So here's number 1. Okay, and finally, I do have a sound clip. To make it really hard, I would have made you guess off the sonogram, but we will not, or sorry, spectrogram, not sonogram, but we won't do that. I will actually play it. Oh no. Okay, maybe we'll skip this one. I'm sorry, I thought I linked specifically to the clip that I needed, but okay, cool. So we'll just go with the first 4 questions. So I will track back, and then Stephanie, if you want to go through.
All right, well, if you guessed male, you're correct. This is an immature male redstart, and we know that because the black feathers are coming in on the face. And again, we have another young male. This time it's a ruby-throated hummingbird. And this is pretty easy to miss, but you can see one tiny throat gorget feather coming in the little red patch. So soon this will be a beautiful adult, but it's still growing. And number 3, we have another bird that we talked about in the beginning. This is the female white-breasted nuthatch. And you can tell her apart from the male by the gray cap contrasting with the black nape, whereas the male has an all black cap. And lastly, I saw a number of answers that were correct on this one. Another female, this is a female pileated woodpecker, which lacks the red mustache that Purbita pointed out, but also missing the red feathers in between the cap and the beak. So usually the male has an all red cap that extends all the way across the crown to the base of the beak. And then the last one was the female Baltimore Oriole, but I saw that was given away in the when you clicked on that link.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, one thing I do like looking at the spectrograms, especially with, like the nuanced female to male vocalization differences. I mean, if you're just like a visual learner, it helps to actually see those sound waves and how they look different. And that hopefully connects back out into the field when you hear the different voices. Cool. So these are our co-founders of the Galbatross Project. I know Joanna was in the audience tonight, and they are all really awesome Audubon scientists and birders and science communicators. And our website is right here, femalebirdday.wordpress.com. And again, like these are just, we just covered like a few different clues that we've turned up during our eternal search for female wisdom, female bird wisdom. Yeah, hopefully you can spend this weekend and the many weeks ahead learning a lot more and personalizing, your experiences with female birds. And here's some of the resources we used for our research. Birds of the World, you do need a subscription to that, but there are some really good entries about like breeding behavior and such. Someone asked like if there's a good resource for female birdsong. The Female Birdsong Project, they have some examples and clips, but I wouldn't say like it's, a good, like, it's not like a great study guide. If you search through the Macaulay Library and just, filter for female bird calls with like the species you're interested in, that could be really helpful. Just note that not all of those like IDs are confirmed. So I know like I've included photos that were not actually females and Stephanie was like, So yeah, take that with your own fact-checking skills. And yeah, just talk to other atlasers, talk to the experts who are running the atlas in your state. If you come across bird banders while you're out there or shorebird monitors, like these folks are have huge wealths of knowledge. And most times people love to share. So yeah, keep spreading the good word. Cool. Yeah, so any open questions? Don't want to keep you all for too long. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. So I think we answered the resource for female birdsong. I don't know if Stephanie, do you have any other tools that you use? I mean, maybe the new Merlin Song ID feature is going to end up being an awesome resource. We'll have to put it to the test.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I'm still learning when it comes to female bird song. That's a tough one. But yeah, as I think you showed on your screen when you were searching the Macaulay Library, you can search by sex, which is pretty cool. Oh, someone did ask about, oh, sorry. I think we're maybe time's up or.
No, I have a question actually.
Oh, you have a question. Okay.
I noticed on your website that you have like a form where people can submit observations, their own anecdotal evidence. And one, I just wanted to point the listeners to that resource, that's a great way to help add to our growing knowledge. But two, I wondered if you had like a list like by species and like here's all the tips for distinguishing the sexes. Like have you compiled that and made it available anywhere or anything like that?
Yeah. Oh, and actually, I was just trying to scroll back up to see your question, and I saw that you asked that in the chat. So, yeah, yeah. So we do have a list on our website or a form that you can enter information on female bird observations. And I already saw a lot of great ones in the chat that people were noticing, you know, songs that they've heard and other cool traits. So you can enter species observation data on what kind of, how you knew something was female, what bird it was, you know, when and where you saw it, and or all, you know, however you want to describe it. And we hope that someday that we'll be able to share that as a resource and have it out there, because, you know, there isn't really just like one resource to female bird identification.
Yeah, and someone also asked if we could summarize like the different species we covered in this presentation. So yeah, I'll also look to upload these presentations on that website so they can be accessed easily. I also liked this question, and there are also a few general Atlas questions here. So if any of the Atlas leaders want to chime in, that totally works. But does female singing serve the same purpose as male singing? I mean, conventional wisdom is that most of the like, you know, flashiest male songs are specifically for like mating attraction. So most females probably aren't doing that. But if you generally think about the purpose of song and calling, I mean, it's communication, just like among humans. So females are communicating, again, whether it be with their mates or with their chicks, or whether it be with a threat. There have been some cool studies on female superb lyrebirds in Australia, and they actually also will mimic sounds that they've heard in their environment. Sometimes hawks, they'll mimic hawks just to scare away any unsavory characters that are hanging around their nests. So yeah, different purposes possibly, but we're still learning more about that.
Well, I have something to add to that too. It's a really cool fact is that we've, well, because of the Female Birdsong Project, which is, you know, another project outside of what we're doing, but they've you know, compiled like how many female birds sing out of, you know, all the species in the world. And they've found that more female birds sing in the tropics. It's actually very common, to the point where we think that, you know, it was actually normal for female birds to sing. And then as they moved into areas with, you know, shorter breeding seasons, female actually lost their song. And that's, so the purpose of females and males singing together would be to both share in the practice of defending a territory. And when the breeding season is shorter up here in the northern latitudes, you know, there's less time to focus on, you know, defending the territory, and the female has to put more time into incubating just in that little narrow window. So, you know, in the tropics, they'll be defending their territory year round, and in the northern latitudes or in the southern too, you know, with that shorter window, they kind of change their behavior and lost their songs.
Okay, and then someone asked, what purpose do the eye flecks on the oyster catchers serve? Speculation strongly invited. Yeah, I would really, I don't know enough about oyster catcher and their lives to even be able to speculate. Although, you know, when you see like dark pigmentation, usually there's some connection to like sun protection or, you know, just endurance of like the organs or feathers or whatnot. So yeah, I don't know why that would be different among female oyster catchers versus males though, because I do think they're both out on the nest, out in the hot sun. So that wasn't a very good speculation.
If you don't know the answer, it's always sexual selection, right? Even though we have no idea, you know, why birds are selecting traits over the other, but it's, you know, maybe it's like an aesthetic thing that they just like.
I was just going to throw in too that it'd be interesting. I don't know if anybody's looked at oyster catcher eyes under black light. That might not actually be good for them, but because birds see in the ultraviolet, we know puffin-bills actually glow different colors in the UV spectrum. So I wonder if that's something with a female. Maybe those flecks look different to birds than what we're seeing in our visual spectrum.
Yeah, that's an awesome, yeah, that's a better speculation.
I think it looks like we've hit all the questions, at least things that got into the Q&A. I need to give a quick shout out to my wife, ran to the mailbox for me. Still time to get your orders in, but I just wanted to make sure that we all, especially before folks hop off here, we want to, unfortunately in webinar, we can't see everyone, but if we can virtually put our hands together, post all of our virtual claps in the chat. But to really thank Stephanie and Purbita for giving us the time tonight and teaching us so much about female birds, which is, again, such an important part of atlasing. So really appreciate the two of you coming and being a part of this event. And I certainly learned a lot. I didn't think we'd be hearing about underbeards and goatees or whatever the comparison was. That was fantastic. I can't wait to use that on a bird walk or something.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Now I understand how bloodthirsty state atlases are when, you know, rivaling each other.
All right. Yeah, if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to throw them in the chat really quick before we hop off. Otherwise, if you post them on, if you go to the landing page of your state, you should be able to find contact information there if you have additional questions throughout the weekend. And it'd be good to get connected with your state atlas if you're not already connected. So yeah.
Yeah, look for all the, each state will have a different training event tomorrow night. So if you had atlas specific questions that maybe didn't get addressed, and I think Glenn just put the links to the various eBird pages, which should link you to your state's events. So check that out. Go to those events tomorrow. You'll learn a lot and be ready to hit the ground running this weekend. And then it'll be next week at this time, we'll have our award ceremony. So I can't wait to see that beautiful trophy on its way to Maine, wherever it may go. I hope everyone has a great, fun weekend. Be safe, find lots of birds, go to your priority blocks, and keep your cats indoors.